All right, now coming to the stage, Hans van Dam. Thank you very much.
Clicker there.
Yes.
Let's see. Yeah, that's working, Dustin. That's good. You'll see me doing this a lot. Show of hands, who knows who this is? A few people. So this is Maeve, and she's a character on a TV show called Westworld. And Westworld sort of takes place in the near future. It's a fantasy park, and people go there to sort of interact with robots. So Maeve is actually a robot, and she's a host in the park. And on one hand, they're very service-oriented and cater to everybody's needs, and they also try to persuade people, right? What you'll see in this show is that there's a combination of artificial intelligence and people actually writing the dialogue. And if you now look at like the chatbot landscape, you know, we're using chatbots for sales and persuasion and for service, and it is that combination between AI and people actually writing the dialogue. Yeah. This one's probably more familiar, right? This is from the movie Her. It's about a guy that buys an OS and he sort of starts talking to it. It's very awkward in the beginning, but then he feels more comfortable around it, and they sort of become friends. They become very good friends, and they fall in love, and they build this intimate relationship. And then all of a sudden he sort of discovers that she's talking to tens of thousands of other people, and that's when he sort of drops out of the experience. He ends up in the Uncanny Valley, and that's sort of the end of it. That ruins it for him. But it sort of shows you that, you know, people and bots will be living together, will be working together, so we really need to learn to communicate with each other. Yeah, so generally we're going to have a new role called Conversation Designer, right? So that's sort of what we do. We recognize, develop, and promote the role of the Conversation Designer. We train and certify people, and we help brands directly. Next one. So some stuff that we work on is like a cruise ship where you have a smart speaker in every cabin, and you ask questions about the ship, and, you know, is the sushi bar open, is the karaoke, the whole experience you can sort of do in a cruise ship. Or I've always experienced that if you go to a restaurant and then you tell Google, it's like, hey, remember that bill from yesterday? Can you split it with my friend John? And then John gets a payment link through the Google Assistant. Kind of cool. But what we really do is work with big companies, big tech companies, to figure out what their department's going to look like. Every enterprise is going to have this conversational AI department 5 years from now. So who's going to be working there? What are they going to be doing all day? And that's what we develop curriculum for and train people for. And yeah, let's go to the next one straight away, right? So if there's one slide that I'd like you to remember, I guess it's this one. If we're going to have a robot talk to a human, then two things really stand out. And one has an artificial brain, and the other one has a human brain. And they both have their own limitations and capabilities, and they both have triggers that they need to function. And what you see now is that the whole industry is really focused on natural language understanding, right? That turns, you know, natural speech into structured data so that an AI brain can perform. But on the other hand, we have a human, right? And they have completely different needs. They need empathy and helpfulness and guidance. So we need to design for that. And if we're going to have conversations between people and bots, then natural language creation should be equally important as natural language understanding. Next one. So if we talk about conversation design, we should learn about technology, psychology, and language. And also, if you look at your departments, the way that's set up, you want to have a similar balance. And what you see now is that most companies have, like, for every writer, they have 10 engineers. But you probably want to have a better balance between the two to create better and more natural conversational experiences. So there's a lot of techniques, actually, that you have to learn to become a conversation designer. And there's a lot of stuff that just comes from copywriting or from blogging or just traditional conversation design. So I'll just walk you through a couple of those and sort of get some idea of what a conversation designer actually does. Yay. Oh yeah, 3 mistakes. Yay, let's go with that first. Let's go to the next one straight away, yeah. So what we see companies do a lot of the time, and everybody's making these mistakes, and you're probably making them as well, is to start with technology, to focus on knowledge management, and to lead with the business operation, right? So they go out and they buy this cool conversational AI stack. They start building. The engineers are like a year into the project already, and that's when they bring in the first writers. That's a bad idea. Or like focus on knowledge management. Think from, you know, all the exceptions and try to give the most complete answer all the time. That doesn't work either. Or sort of start with like the business process that you have, and then you turn that into a flow chart, and then you give it to the writer and say, hey, we need some words for this. That doesn't work either, because that's not how people talk, right? So this is really, you know, avoiding these mistakes is going to save you a lot of money already. Let's go to the next one straight away. Yeah, so sort of illustrate how people communicate. There's a really bad joke that I have to tell. So there's two fish and they're swimming in the water, and then they see a third fish. It's like, hey, good afternoon, how you doing, And then they say, isn't the water lovely today? And the two fish look at each other and they're like, what the hell is water? Because fish don't know about the water because they're surrounded by water. And the point I need to make, that's what a silly joke is for. It's the same with people in communication, right? So we communicate all day long, our entire lives, and we're very good at it. We have all these advanced techniques that we're applying that we're not even aware of, right? So if we want to design better conversations, we first need to understand how people communicate, deconstruct that, and then we can apply it to conversation design. So the cooperative principle, some of you, it was referenced yesterday as well, it's really that when people communicate, it's identified by Paul Grice, there's a couple things that we do. We sort of provide truthful information, we provide the right amount, everything we say is relevant to the conversation that we're having, and we do it in the right tone of voice pretty much. And this comes natural to us, and is very complicated for AIs. So if, we tend to skip steps. You can pay using PayPal or credit card. Do you want to pay? I'll use MasterCard, right? So don't expect a yes or no answer to a yes or no question. That's not how people talk. It's not going to work in a chatbot. You have to design for that. Or this one. How many rooms are in your house? Well, let's see. There's the living room, 2 bedrooms, children's room, kitchen, bathroom. That's how people answer that question, and that obviously never works. So how most companies solve this problem is, we'll make like a list of all the different rooms that we have, and we'll create synonyms for that, and then if we hear bedroom, we'll do +1, right? And then kitchen, we'll do +1, and that takes us about a sprint or 2, and then we get it to work. But if you got conversation designers on your team, you can go to the next one, you could just say, sorry, how many rooms was that? And you see a lot of companies actually, turning this into an engineering problem, but you could actually save a lot of time and money by seeing it as a design problem. And this is just called a rapid reprompt, and it takes 5 minutes to write, or 5 seconds, if you know what you're doing, and then you solve this issue. But also we infer meaning, right? So are you all set for the meeting for today? What time does it start again? Please answer yes or no. That's not how you want to communicate, right? But this is how most chatbots do that. Yay! So you would want to say, oh, you still have 3 hours and it's only a 10-minute drive to get there. This is what conversations are between people, but it's very difficult for bots. Yay! So let's go to the process that we have. Yay! So we put together this design process because what we see is that since there's so many engineers and so few designers, is that it's very difficult for them to get something going. They don't really, they show up with the best intentions and they write the best way they can, but they don't really have the skill set or the process. So that's what we've given them. You take your use case and then we have, the bot needs and the user needs. I'll show you that in a second. And then you do something called sample dialogue, which is like improvisational theater pretty much. And then you turn that into a flowchart. So you don't even start with that. Then you do some quick Wizard of Oz testing and the expert rewrite. And what we see is that having this process really allows your writers and designers to build more confidence as well, because they now have a structured way of working. They have a way to, they have supporting arguments for whatever it is they design. So it builds a better team in relation to the engineers. So we have a canvas for the user needs and the bot needs, and this is like an overview pretty much. It's more detailed, but the way we sort of see it is that we're going to have a conversation, and the human has both rational needs and emotional needs. It has certain expectations, it has certain experiences, it has certain anxieties and motivations. So you want to map that out on the canvas. And it's the same for the bot on the other hand, right? It has certain capabilities, certain superpowers that it can look stuff up real quick, or certain limitations, information that it has to ask, information that it has to share. And you just want to put that on the canvas and be very detailed about that, because you're going to use it for the next step. Aren't you, Dustin? Yes. So in the next step, you're going to do the sample dialogue. And what it pretty much means is that one person's going to be playing the chatbot, and the other person's going to be playing the user. And you're going to be sitting back to back from each other, and you're sort of going to study what you just put on the canvas, right? And you're going to get into character, and you're going to sit back to back from each other. So there's no visual communication, and it's just your voice that you're designing with. And you'll do that role play, and it's very messy in the beginning, but you'll get better. And each time the user asks a question, that's sort of a sign of a concern or an anxiety that they might have. So you want to then proactively communicate that. And you'll do a couple tries, and you'll quickly get to the most natural conversation pretty much. And then the next one is to do Wizard of Oz testing. So once you have that dialogue designed, you're not going to just implement it in Rasa or Dialogflow or whatever you're using. You want to validate it very quickly. So you probably have from the role play a bunch of post-its on the wall with your prompts. Now you're just going to bring people in, like bring in the coffee lady or the cleaning lady or a colleague, and just run them through the dialogue. And you're going to quickly validate if that design that you just created, if that holds up and makes sense. So you get feedback in 30 minutes on your entire dialogue. It's also a great way to collect the utterances for your training model, right? Because whatever people say, that is what your users are going to be saying. And then the next step really is the detailed conversation design, where you're going to be looking at the long tail, where you're going to be handing it over, and particularly the error handling in the repair flow. So a lot of chatbots aren't working because you're not putting enough attention to error handling. Right? So a lot of companies or a lot of users are being handed over to an agent way too soon, so you can just use a reprompt to get them back into the dialogue. So yeah, that would be the next step. And then you should have your good conversation and should be ready to go live. So really the benefits of that human-centric design process is that you're going to save costs during the implementation because you're going to go live much faster. You're not going to start building stuff that you have to rebuild later on. You're going to save time optimizing, get higher completion rates, and get a much higher NPS score. Go through the next one. Yay. Yay. All right, talk about persona a little bit. I've got to speed up a little bit here. Yeah, next one. Yeah, it's called pareidolia. Yeah, you'll see a bunch of them. Just skip through them. So there's not a single person here now that doesn't see a face in this. It's quite interesting how that works, right? So we all know that it's not a face, but we see a face in it. It's the same with voices. If we hear a voice within 1 second, we're actually creating an image of who that voice belongs to. And we'll assign gender to it, and we'll figure out how old are they and where do they live and how can it be of value of me. And they create this entire image of who they're talking to, right? So if you have 1 million customers talking to your voice assistant or your chatbot, then they will all create a persona for it. And that's quite tricky, right? Then you're not in control. It's the same with chat as well, right? If you're chatting to someone, Tinder is an example of this. Like if you start texting with someone, you'll build up this image of who they are and what they're like and how wonderful your life can be together. And then you meet them and it turns out that it's completely different, right? So that's just how that works. And so we don't want to do that. So if we need to craft a persona to take control of that entire process, what's taking place in that user's mind. Otherwise, it's going to be inconsistent, less likable, and less trustworthy, and we get to that uncanny valley, right? And that's what we want to avoid. So on one hand, we want to make sure that we have these users that are going to get carried away with these conversations and going to lose themselves in it. So we want to make use of that to create longer dialogues, but at the same time we want to continuously communicate, hey, this is only a game that we're playing and we're just having fun with each other, right? And that's how we sort of steer around that uncanny valley that we want to avoid. So let's show you some writing stuff real quick to wrap it up. Write conversational. Please state your last name should be Dustin. What's your last name? Keep them going. Which gender are you? We see this one a lot. Is it Mr. or Mrs. Brill? Let's keep them going. Turn taking. Turn taking is really important, and we see that go wrong a lot in chatbots. So can you order me a cab? And your chatbot says, sure. Where do you want to go? Starting fee is $7.50, etc. And you see this a lot in chatbots, and it's actually really bad, because what you're doing is you're asking a question, but then you're adding more information immediately. And then you get those situations that you sometimes have when you're talking to people on the phone, and it's like you're not sure whose turn it is to speak, right? Because it's very confusing. He's confused too. So let's go. Sure, where do you want to go? Leidseplein. And right, it's about 25 euros. Is that okay, right? So you want to have these very short prompts with very simple questions to which people just say yes and no pretty much. Let's go to the next one. It's called an explicit confirmation. I would like to book a table. You would like to book a table. Is that correct? So that's the explicit confirmation. And I will show you the implicit confirmation. Right? I would like to book a table. Sure, that's an acknowledgement. This is an implicit confirmation. I can book you a table. What time should I book it for? Tonight. And what's interesting is that people do this as well, right? If I go to a bar during the day and it's very quiet and I'll say, hey, can I get 2 beer? Then the bartender will probably say, all right, 2 beer coming right up, right? But if I go to the same bar in the evening and there's a lot of people there and there's a lot of music, he'll probably say, 2 beer, is that correct? So we do that too. When our confidence level is low, we use an explicit confirmation versus an implicit. Dustin? Yay! Keep going. Yeah. So the way to look at it, where we want to use bots, this is a model by Bill Price from Amazon. And pretty much there's stuff that's super valuable to the customer and super valuable to the business, right? And stuff that's not valuable to either, we just eliminate altogether. But for the other stuff that's valuable to the customer but not so much to the business, we can automate that, right? So that's where we use chatbots, that's our customer service domain. At the top left, that's where we want to be more persuasive, so that's stuff that's valuable to you, but not so much to the customer. So we can use chatbots there to simplify it. And the difference between the two is at the bottom right, that's where your user actually has an intrinsic motivation to talk to your bot. So you can keep the dialogue a bit more transactional, a bit more straightforward. And then the other one, you got to be a bit more persuasive. So you need to increase motivation. So there's some writing techniques that you can apply there. So the simple question technique. Do you ever think about the future? If you have this on your website and it pops up, these little questions, simply just clicking the button is easier than just sort of clicking away the entire screen. So people will start engaging with your chatbot, and you'll be able to convert them at one point. The simple question technique. Then we have the exceptional benefit, and this is traditional copywriting, right? But we can apply it to chatbots. Want to get a discount by answering a few simple questions? Yes, no, tell me more. So all these techniques from advertising are going to work for chatbots. And also choice architecture. Want to know how to win friends and influence people? Of course, yes, maybe, no. So if you add more positive options, then the odds of your user selecting a positive option greatly increase. And these are techniques that you can apply everywhere in the conversations that you're designing. Small commitments work too. Want to answer 3 simple questions? Yes or no. It's also when people say yes 3 times in a row, they're more likely to give a positive answer the 4th time. So we're working with a bank and we had the question of what's the origin of your wealth? It was an investment bank. And everybody would just drop out of the chatbot there, right? Nobody likes to answer those questions. So we said, hey, thanks for working with me. Am I doing a good job? Yes. Do you have another minute? Yes. Are you ready for the next question? Yes. What's the origin of your wealth? And you see conversion rates go up 40% immediately by just applying these little psychological tricks. So here you combine a bunch of stuff, right? To lock in the order, I'm going to ask you 3 simple questions. For most people, this only takes a minute. Does that sound good? Yes, sure, tell me more. So this is one prompt pretty much, but it has social proof, expectation management, the reward at the end of it, and choice architecture all applied in one prompt. And this is how you want to be designing your conversations to get better results and to make them more natural. Can we get the next one? Yeah, and then there's managing emotions. There's a lot of psychology behind that you can just apply for your chatbots. Isn't there, Dustin? Yay. So we developed the escalation prevention model, and it pretty much means that you have these negative emotions that can pretty much turn into undesired behavior, right? So somebody that's very angry can become revengeful, or someone that's sad can sort of end the relationship, yay, obviously. So there's all these different copywriting techniques that you can apply to prevent that from happening, right? So when you have an angry customer, maybe you don't say, we closed down your account because you did not pay your bill. You want to depersonalize that situation. So you say, well, at the end of the month, we always get the money. We didn't get it, so we automatically shut down the account. Let's figure out what happened, right? So there's all these different writing techniques that you can just apply when you're designing these conversations. So yeah, that's sort of what we do, right? So it's the last slide here pretty much. So we have assessments too now, which is something I'm quite excited about actually. It helps us identify who within your company could actually potentially become a conversation designer. So how much feel for language do they have, etc. Are they intimidated by tech or do they actually like it? we have the curriculum to train people, and obviously we consult and help as an agency. I guess it's the name. Oh yeah, no, it's here. Yeah, so we put together a bot week promo. So if you just go to conversationalacademy.com, you can just sort of check that out and see the stuff that we're up to. There's about 50 videos of me explaining stuff. Yeah, so I think we're all good. You're waving the 1 minute flag. Are there any questions, I guess?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Hans. All right, we got time for 5 minutes, 3 questions. Raise your hands. One. So one, all right, let's go here.
Hi, I love that presentation. I'm also a conversation designer, and I also see a lot of great design practices for IVR that most IVR designers don't follow. So I'm just curious, what's your background? Did you come from voice/IVR like most conversation designers?
Yeah, so I always wanted to be a novelist. And so I wrote a manuscript, and then the publisher said, let's not do that. So I became a copywriter, and I started working with tech companies, and I worked at an incubator, had my own little startup. That went bust, so I got a job in customer service. And then when chatbots became a thing, I was like, hey, I understand the tech, I know how to write dialogue, and I understand the service space, so let me go and explore this. And then my co-founders, they had a behavior design agency, so they have all the background in psychology, and they applied that.
Hi. So when writing a copy for a chatbot versus a voice bot, what are the differences in the conversational nuances that you would recommend the copywriters to take care of?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what we do is design voice first, right? So we sit back to back from each other. If you can figure it out with voice, then a chatbot's easy, right? So we start with the bare minimum. And even if we're just doing a chatbot, we still design voice first. So everything that we make, you can use for voice, and then if you want to do chat, you can add a picture, add a button, make it easier, right? It's also, if you can't figure it out during the exercise, then you know it's not going to work for voice, but then maybe you can do it for chat, right? So that's sort of the mechanism that we have in place.
Hey Hans, have you heard of anyone, or have you looked into building a user profile around a user, like with a personality and sentiment?
On the user end as well, right? So a lot of times, a lot of companies have that, and we take that as input. So if we look at, if we have the canvas, we'll know, okay, we're dealing with this type of user. Where are they? Are they in the is it likely that they're in the kitchen or on a busy subway? And we'll sort of, make that character as rich as possible. And we zoom in on one user persona for the design. And if you have multiple that are very different from each other, then we just sort of do one by one and try to sort of meet in the middle a little bit.
Thank you very much. Can we get a round of applause for Hans?
Thank you.